She slapped a man everyone else feared. But what she didn't know was that he ran half the city, and that slap would change both their lives forever. It was a cold Friday night in downtown Chicago, the kind of night where the streets glowed under the rain, and neon signs flickered like secrets waiting to be told. Inside a small jazz bar tucked between two old brick buildings, a woman named Elena Ward was finishing her shift behind the counter. She wasn't just a waitress, not really. By day, she worked at the precinct, badge hidden deep in her purse. But tonight, she was undercover, chasing whispers of a man the entire department wanted. A name that made even criminals lower their voices. Marcus Black Kane. He was ruthless, untouchable, and invisible to the law. Nobody had seen him up close, at least not and lived to talk about it. But Elena had her assignment. Get close, get proof, and get out. Simple, on paper. The bell above the bar door rang and everything changed. A man walked in, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black trench coat and a calmness that felt dangerous. The room went quiet, as if even the music dared not cross him. Elena noticed how every eye in the bar avoided his. He took a seat in the corner, his rings glinting under the dim light. Whiskey, no ice. His voice was smooth but heavy, the kind that leaves a mark. Elena didn't know it yet, but this was him, the ghost she'd been hunting. As Elena poured his drink, she caught him staring. Not in a creepy way, but like he was reading her piece by piece. He smirked, lifted the glass, and said, "You got guts working here alone this late." She smiled back, keeping her cover tight. "I can handle myself." He leaned forward. "I bet you can. What's your name?" "Elena." "Pretty name. Doesn't fit this place." The comment stung. Maybe it was his tone, smooth yet arrogant. Maybe it was the power he carried like perfume. She tried to laugh it off, but then he snapped his fingers at her, motioning for another drink. And something inside her snapped too. "Don't snap at me," she said sharply. The bar went silent again. The music stopped. A few men at the corner froze mid-sentence. Marcus tilted his head, amused. "What did you say?" "I said," she leaned closer, eyes burning, "don't snap at me." And before she could stop herself, she slapped him. A sharp, echoing crack filled the room. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then his guards stood up. Hands went to jackets. Guns, maybe. But Marcus just smiled. The restaurant was frozen. Every pair of eyes locked on the booth in the corner. The waitress who just slapped a man people whispered about. And the man who could destroy lives with a single call. No one dared breathe. Marcus slowly lifted a napkin, dabbed the corner of his mouth where her hand had struck, and placed it neatly on the table. Then with a calmness that felt almost unreal, he said, "Sit down." Elena hesitated. "Excuse me?" He pointed to the seat across from him. "Sit, you've got my attention now." Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, but walking away would draw more attention, and if she ran, her cover might be blown. So she sat, heart pounding, palms sweaty, trying to look unfazed. Marcus leaned back, eyes never leaving hers. "You've got fire. I like that. Most people around me," he gestured vaguely toward his men, "don't even breathe too loud." "Maybe they're smart," she shot back. He smiled, almost impressed. "Maybe they are, but you're different. What's your name again?" "Elena." "Elena," he repeated, rolling the name on his tongue. "Pretty name for someone with a right hook like that." A couple of waiters began clearing nearby tables, pretending not to listen. The manager peeked nervously from behind the counter, mouthing something to a hostess. Probably call security. But before anyone could move, Marcus raised his hand slightly, signaling his men to stand down. "No harm done," he said, his voice steady but laced with something unreadable. Elena could feel the tension slowly drain from the room, but the air still buzzed. She had to stay calm, stay invisible. But she knew. The moment he'd asked her name, something shifted. He wasn't angry. He was curious, and in her line of work, curiosity was far more dangerous than rage. Marcus didn't leave after that. In fact, he stayed long after closing time, sipping whiskey while the restaurant emptied out. Elena kept cleaning tables, pretending not to notice him, but she felt his eyes following her every move. When the last customer left, he finally spoke. "You know, people usually talk to me with fear. You talk like you've got nothing to lose." She shrugged. "Maybe I don't." He raised an eyebrow. "Everyone's got something to lose, Elena. Family, dreams, secrets." He paused, letting the word secrets linger in the air. "Which one's yours?" She forced a laugh. "What makes you think I've got any?" He smiled faintly. "Because I've got a few myself." For a second, she forgot who he was. The danger. The files she'd read, the people he'd hurt. He didn't sound like a crime boss. He sounded tired, lonely even. But she quickly snapped back. This was her target. This man had blood on his hands, and she couldn't afford to forget that. Still, as he stood to leave, he looked at her one last time. "You've got a good swing, Elena, but be careful who you hit next time." And with that, he walked out, leaving behind a $100 bill and an unease she couldn't shake. That night, when she returned to her car, Elena sat in silence. Her phone buzzed. A message from her handler at the precinct. "Any sign of Kane?" She stared at the screen, then typed back, "No, nothing yet." Then she turned off her phone, leaned back, and whispered to herself, "God, what did I just start?" It had been 3 nights since the slap. Elena thought maybe he'd let it go. Maybe the city's most feared man had moved on. But when she stepped into Marlowe's Dine and Grill that Tuesday evening, her breath caught, because sitting in the exact same corner booth was Marcus Kane. This time he wasn't alone. 2 of his men sat at a nearby table, scanning the room like hawks. But Marcus, he was smiling, calm, almost charming. "Evening, Elena," he said when she walked by. She froze. "You remember my name?" He chuckled. "Hard to forget the woman who slapped me in front of half of Chicago." She swallowed, keeping her tone neutral. "You here for another whiskey?" "No," he said. "Dinner. And conversation." Elena hesitated. She couldn't turn him away, not without blowing her cover. So she nodded, grabbed a notepad, and forced a polite smile. "What'll it be?" "Surprise me." Those 2 words unsettled her more than anything else. Because in this line of work, surprises were never good. Marcus ate slowly, like a man who had nowhere to be. Between bites, he asked questions. Not the kind she expected either. "Where are you from? You got family? You always wanted to work in a place like this?" He wasn't flirting. He was studying her, trying to peel back layers. And for every question, she gave safe, fake answers. But at one point, she slipped. He asked, "You believe in justice, Elena?" And before she could stop herself, she said softly, "I used to." He looked up, his expression darkening just a little. "Used to?" She froze, stupid, too personal. "Yeah," she added quickly. "Before I realized the world doesn't play fair." Marcus leaned back, swirling his drink. "You're right about that. Fair's a word people like us can't afford." There was something heavy behind his words. Regret, maybe. And for the first time, Elena wondered if there was more to this man than the report said. When he left that night, he tipped double again. But before walking out, he looked at her and said, "Same time tomorrow, detective." Her heart stopped. Did he just... She turned sharply, but he was already gone. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She replayed his words over and over. He knew. He knew. The next morning, she stormed into the precinct, slamming her badge on the table. "He made me," she told her captain. "He knows who I am." Her captain frowned. "Did he threaten you?" "No, not yet." "Then he's playing with you," he said. "That's what men like him do. They make you doubt yourself before they strike." Elena nodded, but deep down she wasn't sure. Marcus had plenty of chances to hurt her. But he hadn't. Not once. Still, she agreed to continue the mission. One more meeting. One more night. Then they'd make the arrest. That evening, as she put on her uniform, no, her disguise, she couldn't shake the strange feeling that tonight would change everything. The restaurant was quiet that night. Rain hammered the windows, thunder rolling in the distance. Marcus sat alone, no guards this time. Just him, and that same unreadable calm. When Elena approached, he gestured for her to sit. "I know who you are," he said softly. "Detective Ward." She didn't move. "Then why am I still breathing?" He smiled sadly. "Because you're the first cop who didn't come at me with a gun." He reached into his coat, and her hand instinctively went to her waist. But he didn't pull a weapon. Instead, he slid a small envelope across the table. Inside were photographs, not of crimes, not of money, not of him, but of children, poor neighborhoods, empty fridges, torn shoes. "I built my empire," he said quietly. "But I never forgot where I came from. You think I'm the villain, Elena? Maybe I am. But the city doesn't care about people like them. I do." She stared at the photos, torn between duty and disbelief. Then he said the one thing she didn't expect. "You're not here to arrest me tonight. You're here because you don't know which side you're really on anymore." And the worst part? He was right. For the first time since her undercover mission began, Elena didn't know what to say. Marcus Kane, the man she'd sworn to bring down, wasn't acting like the monster from her case files. He leaned forward, voice low. "You ever ask yourself who really runs this city, detective?" She didn't answer. He went on. "It's not people like me. It's the suits. The ones who sit behind glass towers, pretending their hands are clean. They pay cops, judges, and politicians. And when they need something dirty done, they call me. Elena's heart pounded. You're admitting it? I'm admitting I did what they paid me to do. But I also built homes where the city never bothered to. I kept kids off the streets while they cut school funding. Tell me, who's really the criminal here? His words hit harder than she wanted them to. It wasn't a confession. It was a mirror, forcing her to see the cracks in her own belief in justice. She stared at him for a long moment, then whispered, "You can't fix wrong with more wrong." Marcus smiled faintly. Maybe not, but at least I'm doing something. Can you say the same, detective? After he left, Elena sat there long after closing, the photos still spread across the table. Children in broken homes, families forgotten by the system she worked for. She'd joined the force to help people like them. But lately, it felt like she was just filling out reports that changed nothing. Her phone buzzed again. "Captain, we're ready to move. He's coming tomorrow night. Get him to talk. We'll handle the rest." She typed but didn't send. Her fingers hovered over the screen. For the first time, she didn't know which side she was on. The next day passed in a blur. Every sound felt louder, every shadow longer. She replayed Marcus's words over and over. That night, she returned to Marlowe's. Same booth. Same storm outside. But this time, something felt final. He was already waiting. "Elena," he said quietly, "you shouldn't have come back." "I have to," she said. "It's my job." He shook his head. "No, it's your choice." The sting was set. Hidden microphones, plainclothes officers parked outside, and a dozen eyes on the restaurant feed, all waiting for her signal. Elena sat down across from Marcus, her heart hammering. She just needed him to confess. One word, one phrase, and they'd storm in. But Marcus wasn't giving them what they wanted. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. "You know, I figured out something after that slap." She blinked. "What's that?" "You don't scare easy. That means you've seen things, lost things. People like us, we're not so different." Her throat tightened. "We are different. You break the law. I uphold it." He smiled sadly. "You enforce a system that's already broken. I just stopped pretending." Her earpiece crackled. "Get him talking, Ward, now." Marcus looked toward her hand under the table. "You're wired," he said softly. "Of course you are." Her stomach dropped. "Marcus," he raised a hand. "Don't, you're just doing your job." He leaned back, eyes full of something that looked almost like forgiveness. "Guess it's my turn to do mine." Before she could react, he stood, pulled a small black device from his pocket and pressed it. Every light in the restaurant flickered, then went out. The next seconds were chaos. Screams from the kitchen, the sound of glass breaking. Then, boom, a flash of orange lit up the night outside. Elena ducked, ears ringing. Smoke filled the air. Through the haze, she saw Marcus walking toward the back exit, calm, unhurried. "Marcus!" she shouted. He turned slightly, face half lit by firelight. "You'll never understand, Elena. But one day, you'll see I wasn't your enemy." And then he disappeared into the storm. By the time the backup team stormed in, the restaurant was half engulfed in smoke. No sign of him. Just his empty glass. And a single folded note left on the table. It read, "You wanted justice. Find it where the law won't go." Elena stood there holding the note, as rain poured through the shattered windows. The mission was over, but nothing felt right. The fire was contained before dawn. Elena stood outside Marlowe's Dine and Grill, watching firefighters hose down the blackened windows. The smell of smoke clung to her hair and clothes. Detectives from other units swarmed the scene, questioning witnesses, collecting evidence. But all she could do was stare at the booth where it all began. The booth where she slapped him. The booth where everything changed. Her captain approached, face tight with frustration. "He played you, Ward. Walked right through us like we were nothing." Elena didn't argue. She couldn't. But when he added, "We'll get him next time," she quietly shook her head. "No, you won't." She didn't know how she knew that, but she felt it deep in her gut. Marcus Kane wasn't coming back. Not here, not ever. Later that night, when she sat in her apartment, she unfolded the note again. "Find it where the law won't go." She couldn't let it go. It felt like more than a taunt. It felt like a message, a direction. So she started digging. Using her badge had limits, but curiosity didn't. Elena began accessing sealed archives, hidden transaction reports, and off-the-book surveillance. What she found chilled her. Half the city's funding for neighborhood cleanup programs, millions in public money, had been funneled through fake shell companies. companies tied directly to elected officials, and the same addresses Marcus's organization used. But instead of laundering drug money, the transactions led somewhere unexpected. Community housing projects, youth shelters, and street rehab centers. Marcus had been using dirty money, but to fund things the government ignored. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the files. The deeper she looked, the clearer it became. Marcus wasn't just running an empire of crime. He was trying to fix the rot from the inside. She whispered, "Oh my God." He was telling the truth. The next morning, Elena drove across town to one of the addresses from the files, an old community shelter on the south side. When she stepped in, a woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. "You're with the department, right? Marcus said you'd come." Elena froze. "Marcus told you that?" The woman nodded. "He used to come by every week. Paid for all the meals, never wanted his name on anything. Said someday, a woman with eyes like storm clouds would show up asking questions." Elena's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because he wanted you to see what he was really fighting for." The woman led her to a back room. On the wall were framed photos. Marcus with kids, painting walls, handing out meals, fixing broken doors. Not a gangster, not a monster. A man trying to clean a world that refused to be cleaned. Elena felt something in her chest crack open. Guilt, anger, sorrow, all at once. He wasn't running from justice. He was justice. Just a version the system didn't want to admit existed. That night, Elena sat in her car, parked outside the shelter, rain streaking the windshield. Her phone buzzed again, unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Detective Ward," came a familiar voice. Low, calm, steady. "Marcus?" she whispered. "Don't say where you are," he said quickly. "They're watching you now. The same people who wanted me gone." She clenched the steering wheel. "You faked your death?" "I had to. They were closing in, and not the ones with badges." She swallowed hard. "Why tell me this?" "Because you're not like them. You saw past the badge, past the headlines. You felt what's wrong with this city. I need someone like that." Her pulse raced. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he said slowly, "sometimes the only way to fight the system is from outside it." Before she could answer, the line went dead. She stared at the phone, realizing she'd just crossed a line she could never come back from. A week passed. Elena hadn't slept properly since that call. Every night, she replayed his words. Sometimes the only way to fight the system is from outside it. Her department was in chaos. Internal Affairs had launched an investigation into corruption inside the force. 3 of her superiors were suspended. Her captain, the man who'd ordered her to trap, Marcus Kern, resigned without a word. It was as if Marcus's disappearance had pulled a thread that unraveled the whole city. Then one night, after leaving the precinct, she saw something move in a dark alley near her car. Her instincts kicked in. Hand on her weapon, she stepped closer. And there he was, Marcus, alive, standing under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight. His overcoat soaked from the rain, eyes tired but still sharp. "You shouldn't be here," she said. He smiled faintly. "Neither should you." They stood there for a moment, cop and criminal, allies and enemies, bound by something neither could fully explain. "You burned everything down," she said quietly. "Now what?" "I built something new," he replied. "But I can't run it. Not anymore. The city needs someone it can still trust." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive. "Everything you need. Names, accounts, evidence. Take it." She stared at it, realizing what it was. The key to bringing down the corrupt machine that had fed his empire. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you're the only one who hit me and didn't flinch," he said, with a tired smile. "You saw me for what I was, not the myth. The man." Back in her apartment, Elena stared at the flash drive on her kitchen table. It felt like it was staring back at her, whispering, daring her to open it. On one hand, she could turn it in, get her badge back, be hailed as the hero who finally ended Marcus Kane's legacy. But on the other hand, she knew what that meant. The files would disappear. The names would walk free. The city would pretend justice had been served, while the same men in suits found a new Marcus to do their dirty work. She picked up her phone, scrolling to her captain's number. Then she stopped. Instead, she opened her laptop, inserted the flash drive. Her screen filled with documents, ledgers, transactions, proof, and one folder labeled simply, "For Elena." Inside were photos of her, taken from security cameras, news articles, and a single handwritten note that read, "You were never my enemy. You were my test, to see if there was still anyone worth believing in." Her vision blurred with tears. The next morning, headlines hit every major network. Massive corruption exposed inside city government. Whistleblower leaks evidence tied to top officials. Elena didn't sign her name to it. She sent the files anonymously to every news outlet in Chicago. Within hours, arrests began. Real arrests. Marcus Kane was still officially dead, but his message was alive, burning through the city. Like truth finally catching fire, Elena walked through the now boarded-up Marlowe's Dine and Grill that night. Ash still clung to the walls, but she smiled faintly. "You won," she whispered into the dark, "in your own way." From somewhere across the street, a black car idled for a moment, then slowly drove off. She didn't need to see who was inside. She already knew. Months later, Elena had left the force. She moved out of the city, opened a small diner by the lake, quiet, peaceful, anonymous. Every now and then, a black envelope would arrive in the mail. No return address. Just a short note. Sometimes it was a quote. Sometimes a joke. Once it simply said, "You still make the best coffee." She'd smile every time. And even though the world believed Marcus Kane was gone, she knew better. He was out there somewhere, still fighting the fight she'd once thought was black and white. Now she understood. Sometimes justice doesn't wear a badge. Sometimes it walks in wearing a black coat and leaves behind a lesson you'll never forget. She poured a cup of coffee, looked out at the quiet street and whispered, "Yeah, I slapped the gangster boss. But maybe he woke me up."